Black excellence is sustaining to Black people and sustaining to the world.
Welcome to the Dripping in Black podcast, where we celebrate Black excellence throughout the Black diaspora. Here's your host, David V. Lewis.
What's up, good people all across the world? This is the Dripping in Black podcast. I am your host, David V. Lewis. And as usual, we have another fantastic guest. Today's guest is Robert A. Murphy. Robert, say hello to the world.
Hello to the world, especially Detroit.
Yes, sir. And Robert has a very interesting story. He's one of our own. What I mean by that, he's an educator. Both Sean and I are educators by trade and educators at heart. And so he's definitely one of our own. So we're going to get into that. And then he has a few other things up his sleeve that we will reveal as we have our conversation. But per usual, we always start with a simple but loaded question of who is our guest. So who is Robert A. Murphy?
Robert A. Murphy is simple yet complex. Is the product of a crazy union, but a beautiful union.
Okay.
He is a product of Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
Both the good and the bad.
Okay.
He is a product of his life experiences, and he is a product of the love of his family.
Okay. So I want to jump right in with Detroit, Michigan, because you're not here any longer, right?
No, I'm not.
Mm.
I live in
Where
DC.
you reside?
Right outside DC.
Yeah. So how does Detroit play into your story?
Detroit plays a huge role in my story. I mean, I was born there. I was born at Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital on Schaefer and Outer Drive. You know, that's where I started, and we lived literally all over the city. I might be the only person that's lived on Finkel, 6 Mile, 7 Mile, and 8 Mile.
Yeah.
Plus, we lived other places too. So you know it.
You're good in every hood then. That's almost a blessing.
The only place I ain't good is on the east side. I ain't never had no east side experiences, but I've been west side all over the place.
Okay, well, when you come here, you can roll with me. I'm good on the east side. I'm born and raised on the east side. Yep. So they know me out there. If they don't know me, they better know me. No, just kidding. All right. And so as I kind of mentioned and alluded to, you have a vast career in education. So let's kind of walk the audience through your start in education and the things of that nature.
Honestly, my start in education was because of my experiences in Detroit with my educational experience. I was always way ahead as far as my performance level. Like when I was in the 6th grade at Emerson Middle School, I took the California Achievement Test and scored a freshman in college in reading comprehension and reading.
Wow.
And a freshman in college for my math comprehension and math score. So for me, school in Detroit.
Yeah, you ain't never been on the east side then. That's not east side numbers.
There it is. So that's a part of it. Like being a Black boy, and the expectations were a little bit different. They weren't necessarily high for me, although I did run into that when I attended Noble Middle School. But the other part of becoming an educator was, frankly, I had a baby that was born 11 days after I graduated from Morgan State University, and I had to feed her. And so that was actually how I got started in education.
Okay. So where was your start at in education?
So my start at was a special ed level 5-6 school. It was called Kennedy Krieger Institute. It's actually a part of Johns Hopkins University Hospital. And so I started there and actually fell in love with the position, because part of my experiences in Detroit and part of just who I am as a person is I want to see us be the best us. And I had so many experiences in Detroit, and I know we'll talk about it a little. I remember very vividly one of my best friends growing up, and we had broken a window in his mother's cousin's car or something. And I remember us telling our mothers and having such a very different experience. I told
Mm.
my mom, "Hey, ma, we just broke Lionel's, mom's window," and she was like, "Okay, well, I'll call Miss Williams and we'll figure it out."
Mm-hmm.
And I remember walking from his house, and his mom is beating the crap out of him, calling him all kinds of names, calling him MFs, like all. It was just such a different experience. And so for me, and in my neighborhood, we didn't have no fathers. Like none of us lived with our
Mm.
fathers. So
Yeah.
for me,
Wow.
it was not only the educational piece, but also the mentoring and fathering piece. Like I got to get these boys love because they don't know, they ain't seen man love before. So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was kind
yeah.
of also what drove me and kept me in it, quite frankly.
So the friend's name was who?
It was Lionel.
Yeah, yeah. Lionel's mom was a lot like my mom. That's the kind of treatment I would have got.
Yeah, it was, bro. It was hard to watch because I remember, and I put this in my book. Like I remember his head. Like I was leaving. We lived literally at opposite ends of Greenview off of 7 Mile and
Okay.
excuse me, 7 Mile and Margarita. So I live at one end of Greenview. He lives at the other end, and he falls out of the door. And I just remember his mother having him by the collar, and she's calling him all kinds of names. And I remember we caught eyes. And I just
Mm,
remember looking at him like, damn. And then there was a look of resignation,
mm,
embarrassment, and
mm.
humiliation that my mother was rough, but she wasn't that kind of rough for me. Like she
Yeah.
never demeaned me as a human being. And
Mm,
yeah, and it was total demeaning, dehuman. It was just bad, man. And I will
yeah.
literally never get that in my life. I remember his
Uh,
face. I remember all of it. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay. I think that's a little different than my experience. I think whenever I got it, and I got it pretty good when I was a youth, I was well deserving of it. I was very understanding of what was happening.
Yeah.
There was no there was no resignation. It was more like acceptance of what was to come and that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I thank my mom for how my mom, like you said, my father was not present. He was around, but he wasn't present, especially as far as the parenting. And my
Hmm.
mom had 4 boys.
Okay. Oh my.
I was the third of the 4 boys, and I had a brother that was just a year older than me. So me and him, we always were into something. So
Hmm.
you know, but yeah, that sounds like a different experience. But you did mention this book, so
Yeah.
let's jump in right now about the book, and we'll get back to what you're doing in education because I believe it all ties in. So
Yeah.
first, give us the title of the book.
The title of the book is Niggas Ain't Astronauts. Some people laugh and some people are like, "Oh my God, that's a horrible name." Now
Mm.
let me give a breakdown on the name. The name is something my mother said to me when I was 6 years old. I said, "Mom, I want to be an astronaut." She
Mm.
looked at me just as plain and said, "Bobby, niggas ain't astronauts." She walked away. And so the title, it is a discussion, really.
End of conversation.
In the conversation, like there was no like, well, baby, you might be able to do it, or well, you can go into the military. Like there was no discussion at all. It was you ain't no astronaut. But let me put it in
Mhm.
context as well. I mean, my mother was born in
Okay.
1939, and she had never
Okay.
seen a black astronaut. So in her
No.
mind, that was something that was outside of the purview of black people at the time.
Yeah.
Now I
Yeah.
learned a little bit later on. I'm 6'3", so I could be an astronaut anyway because I'm too big for the damn the ship stick, or whatever. But at 6, I don't have that knowledge, obviously.
At 6, you wasn't 6'3" yet either. So.
No, 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 no. I was husky, as they used to call you. You wasn't fat, you was husky back in the day.
Yeah. Okay. So give me a glimpse of what the book is about. Then niggas ain't astronauts.
Yeah, the book is about my experiences in Detroit, my experiences in Grand Rapids. It's kind of a coming of age story, but it also gives the
Mm,
complexities of black fatherhood, both my own and my father's. Because while I talk about none of us had our fathers, my father always wanted to be a father, but there
mm,
was some that my mother didn't want him to be my father, and so there was some issues
mm.
around his getting
Wow.
to see me,
Mm,
his interaction with me,
mm,
the whole nine. There's a story I tell in the book about, when my grandfather died, my mother's father, I was extremely
mm,
close to. Like, that was my dude. And my
mm,
mother said, your grandfather died, and I immediately had an asthma attack. And I ended up being in the
mm.
hospital over at Mount Carmel. And my
Wow.
dad comes to see me in the hospital, and he's like, "How you doing, son?" And I'm like, "Who is this dude?" Like I'm
Mm,
literally looking at my biological father, like, this dude? He must be Miles' friend or something. And he's like, do you know who I am? And I was like, no. And he said, I'm your dad. And I was like, what? Like, how you like, my mom got a boyfriend that we call Daddy Bob. So how are you my dad? And I just remember my father being crushed. Like, you could see the hurt on his face. And my father, we're Caribbean, so we're from Trinidad, you know. So there's this whole thing Caribbean folk got around their boys, and especially the men and their sons. And I remember my father just being very disturbed when I said that. And then after saying that, he gave me his gift, which was some Hulk underoos, and he rolled out. And I didn't see him again for probably another year. I ended up in the hospital again.
Wow. Okay, so I'm still looking for the niggas ain't astronauts carrying through. So it gets brought up to you when you have this aspiration as a youth, but you name it the title of the book for a reason, right? So tell us a little bit more.
Partially because there's all of this discussion about who Black boys are and who they aren't.
Yeah.
And my belief, and I speak about this, you know, growing up in Detroit, is the vast majority of my friends and even myself, we just wanted to be kids. We just wanted to go play football, play basketball, go to school, get our grades, talk to a girl, go to Northland, go to Fairlane, whatever it is, and do whatever. We didn't want to get involved in all this other stuff. And so the niggas ain't astronauts piece is all of the external factors that play into why we don't get where we probably should be, and how there are so many barriers, particularly for us in specifically, and I won't necessarily say it's only African-American males, but I will say that for us in these urban environments, it's tough. Like, I remember I've been shot at 6 times. I've been shot at 6 times when I was 20 years old.
Nah, that's some East Side talk right there.
Exactly. You know, I mean, we were so there was a lot of things that happened in my life that could have prevented me from being where I am. And, you know, instead of using those trauma experiences as fuel to destroy, I changed those things and they became fuel to grow. And for me personally, there was a lot of it was really weird because I talk about niggas ain't astronauts, but like in my family, I had 4 uncles that I was primarily raised with, and they were all involved, you know, taking me to games. I was going to Tiger games, you know, this, that, and the other. Excuse me. And they were all very successful.
Yeah.
You know, and so it was like, okay, niggas ain't astronauts, but I got these uncles that are really doing it. Like my uncles was making 6 figures in the 70s.
Yeah.
So it's like, wait, this doesn't really make sense, you know, at least from my mother's perspective. So it's just to me the constant kind of push pull that specifically African American men and males have in America, in that we're told this is who we are, but we're a diverse group of people. You know, I talk about my experiences even with music, how, you know, I liked rock. I liked guitar. Like, you know, I still listen to it now. But, you know, growing up in Detroit, that wasn't necessarily, you couldn't say that out loud. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had, I'm trying not, because it's so many places I want to go. Trying not to derail where I'm going. But I had a neighbor who was along with my older brother. And he loved heavy metal. And, you know, so you get labeled, you know, you're kind of a weird dude if you love heavy metal as a Black kid. And, you know, where I was thinking about when you were talking is, it's really part of what we doing at Dripping in Black is dispelling this idea that, you know, the vast majority of Black people, especially Black males, are thugs, right? That's what you would think. If you grow up in America outside of our communities, you would think, well, damn, you know, you had to be in some kind of thug type of environment growing up, and your friends had to be thugs, and, you know, you had to have some kind of street experience or something like that. The vast majority of us do not have that experience. We know some people that live that experience, but the vast majority of our friends, cousins, relatives, all of that are not those people. And I find it interesting, like you said, from your mother's mouth, niggas ain't astronauts. And that speaks to the depth of the brainwashing that we aren't these things. When you, like you said, right around you, you got people, maybe we're not astronauts, but they're doing some things that are very successful, right?
Yeah, and to your point about the thug thing, and I mean, you guys are educators too. For me, I respect the work that people have done around trying to tell our story. But my problem with the books
Yeah,
that have been told about our story is that all of them involve gang banging or street or going to jail. And I
yeah,
specifically wanted my book to not be that. I wanted to
yeah,
be about the average black boy who was growing up in a city that was changing before his eyes.
yeah,
And even about, myself, like I remember being in Detroit and being a boy and not really thinking about anything. And I remember when I hit kind of this height threshold, all of a sudden I was looked at as a threat by everybody. And it was just like, wait a
hmm
minute, like I'm still a little husky boy that likes, eating
yeah,
Now and playing with cars. But
yeah,
it didn't happen that way. I mean, for us it changed.
yeah. Great segue into education, right? Because
Yeah.
you can imagine how our boys are viewed when they walk in a building. And especially if they're not met with somebody from the same type of culture, can see
Hmm.
themselves in them, which
Hmm.
is typically the case with our kids, right?
Yeah.
They are really met with people that don't really understand who they are and that they are really still just kids, even with the
Hmm.
outward appearance that
Hmm.
media has told you makes them some kind of street or some kind of
Hmm.
danger to
Hmm.
society, right?
Hmm.
So let's talk about your educational journey from you were a special ed teacher and you moved on up the ladder, right?
Yeah,
So
I did.
walk us through that.
So I started off as a teacher. Actually, I started off as a teacher's assistant. That was my original job. I was a para.
Mhm,
And then there were some people who saw potential in me and were like, well, we want you to kind of move into this role, work on,
mhm,
we'll get you certificate, we'll get you certified to teach, but we want to put you in some leadership positions. And so I was put in those positions. So then I became like a coordinator in my building. I coordinated the after school program. And then I
mhm.
left there and started teaching at the juvenile justice facility, which was a totally different experience. And
Wow.
what happens in those facilities is just it's
Yeah.
deeply disturbing, and it's deeply disturbing for a lot of different reasons. We don't really, I don't think, have time to discuss that right now, but
Yeah.
yeah, I could tell you some stories about that experience. So anyway, left
Yeah.
that, became executive director of the Salvation Army Boys and Girls Club of Baltimore City. So I had like 5 different clubs under my supervision, about 2,000 kids. I need to take a
Mhm.
break from education because it was pretty intense for me at the time.
Yeah.
And then stayed there for about 3 years. Then got kind of rejuvenated to go back into education. So I became an assistant principal at an alternative school. Loved it, loved
Mm.
my kids. But the one thing that I think for me was, well, what's the turning point for me was my own daughter. I remember I always poured myself into my kids. I give them everything from me. Like I'm gonna be at your games. I'm your daddy in the building. And
Mhm.
I tell my kids, like, when you're in this building, you're my child. And I treat you
Mhm.
as such and I expect as such.
Mhm.
So that was a really great experience. But I remember coming home one day and my daughter was talking to me, and she talked to me for about 10 minutes. I don't remember anything she said. And I was like, wow. So I am
Mm.
listening to other kids' problems all day long. My baby
Yeah.
trying to tell me something. I've checked out. And that
Yeah.
was the moment when I said I need to get out of the building. And that was when I moved on to the Maryland State Department of Education.
Wow. Oh man, that's powerful. That is the job, right?
Yeah.
You pour so much into the job. When you get home, you just want to be home,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You want your woosah moment. You want your time to relax. And then there's people at home that need you to be at your very best as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that is the challenge of an educator. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's my baby. I mean, that was my baby. So like,
Hmm.
as I always told, like I created you. Like it's my responsibility to be everything that I need to be for you. I don't want to hear
Yeah.
when you 20 something. Oh, my daddy wasn't so and so. He wasn't this.
Yeah.
No. If you got issues, it ain't gonna be because of me. Let's just be. And
Yeah.
that was the father that I wanted to be because I know that's what my father wanted to be to me. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to dial back to alternative ed. Describe to the audience what that is, because we know we toss these words around, but
yeah,
it's not
true.
necessarily things that people understand. So what is an alternative ed program?
So an alternative education program is simply a program that it can be based in the school. Mine was a separate site, but it can be based in the school. What ends up happening in the types of students who get sent there are the students who are struggling with behavior, who are struggling with attendance, who are struggling possibly even with work. they aren't necessarily doing very well in the traditional school environment, so they get moved to an alternative program.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. And so you have a foray into alternative ed, and eventually you step out and go up to the state level. And at the
Yes.
state level, you have some major success. You have the receipts, right? So
Yes.
this what role did you serve, or roles did you serve at the state level? And tell the world about your receipts as well.
So what's funny is that I was a program specialist. I wasn't even a program manager or whatever, but
Hmm.
because of tenacity, because of vision, and because of commitment, I got these really large projects that were put in my lap or fell into my lap. And the
Hmm.
superintendent was like, "Robert, do your thing. Like, I respect your work, and I know you know what you're doing, and I don't worry about you." And so I end up rewriting the state's alternative education regulations so they are more inclusive of all students, and not
Hmm.
as I'm trying to use it, not as negative and as punitive as they were
Hmm.
prior to my authoring. And then I also authored the Maryland Code of Discipline. It's for the Maryland public schools. All 1,400 Maryland public schools abide by this code of discipline. I led a
Hmm.
work group of 47 stakeholder groups, from advocates to teachers to unions to all those, and as well as some district superintendents. We put together a really great product, and our state board adopted that in 2014. As well as I did some other things. I created this thing called the Dropout Resource Guide. Essentially, it was a about a 200 or 300 page document that basically highlighted best practices in dropout prevention, what each district was doing. And I say all that to say, so the receipts are, when I led the
Hmm.
discipline work, we cut suspension by 50% in the state, out of school suspension by 50%, in school suspension by 30 or 40%. Specifically for African Americans, we cut suspension for African American students by, I think, 54% or something like that.
Hmm.
Now the challenge was, and this is what people don't sometimes understand, like a district can have a disproportionality going on or disparate data. But
Hmm.
like in our case, like we lower suspension for white kids at 67%, and then for black kids at 51%. So the
Hmm.
disparities look worse than they actually were. I cut
Hmm.
25,000 kids off the black suspension rolls. I only
Hmm.
cut like 6,000 or 8,000 white kids. But when you looked
Hmm.
at the actual number, the number
Hmm.
looked like we hadn't really done any work, but we actually had done a lot of great work. So that's just a word to the wise. When you start looking at this data stuff, make sure that you're comparing apples and apples and not apples and oranges or apples and plums.
Yeah, that's a segue. I got a whole little skit lined up for you because I know that all these great ideas, people were standing up and cheering with open arms. You faced no real challenges. You just rolled out your rolled out your ideas, and people said, "Where you been all my life?" And thank you for coming into education and fixing these problems that existed for years. Is that how your story went, or was it a little different?
Yeah, it was a little different there, brother. I remember my very first presentation on this conversation on school
Mm,
discipline in general. I was
mm.
in a district in Maryland. They will go unnamed. And I was doing a presentation, and they were straight heckling me. They were like, "Well, this don't make no
Mm,
sense, and this data
mm,
don't make no sense." And I was like, "Well, wait a minute. How does this data not, well, this data don't make no sense?" I was like, "Well, wait a minute, let me explain something to you. The data I'm reporting is the data that you reported to us at the state. So if there's a
it's your
problem,
data.
the problem
It's your.
is your data. So the problem relies, it's internal." And I was just pointing, showing them some things like, you got, in 3 years, you suspend more kids in middle school than you do in four
Yeah,
years of high school. That's a problem.
yeah,
Now we can
yeah,
talk about what that is. Now, the great thing
yeah.
was, when I started to work in 2010, I probably had about 4 or 5 districts that were on board. By the time I got done, I really had all 24 districts on board. And frankly, when
Wow.
I left, people were calling me and texting me like, "Yo, Robert, like, what is the state doing?" There was some other things going on behind the scenes, politically, that I didn't have any control over. But
Mm, yeah.
people,
Mm,
I mean, literally white and black people are calling me like, "Yo, like, what are they doing? Like, all this great work
mm,
you did, like, what are they do? Why are they screwing it up? Like, they didn't go far. Like, literally, people said they didn't go far enough."
yeah,
That was what I heard from the district. So I'm a believer that you can get people on board, but it takes
yeah,
the right leader, it takes the right person, and you got to be able to hear both sides of the argument. And that's where I think sometimes people struggle. We get on get these blinders on about our particular issue. And
Yeah.
I'll give you an example about the blinders. Like the advocates were like, well, we shouldn't suspend kids for being drunk in school. They should be able to participate in class. And I was like, that doesn't even make that doesn't make sense. They were like, yeah, well, it does make sense. So they were hell bent on this point being it needed to stay in our state code. And I was like, let me give you an example. Okay, your argument is we should keep kids in school who are on drugs. Let's say Mr. Murphy has a shop class, and this kid comes in, he's high, and he's playing with the saw. He cuts off his finger and somebody else's finger. Now the district's on the hook because ain't nobody. And I'm not saying we need to suspend the kid, but we definitely need to remove the kid and have the parent come. And so that was one of the things. Like it's both sides. There's some extremes on. So anyway, yeah, that was one of the real. I remember one of the kind of like the school district like this doesn't make any sense, and I was like, yeah, I agree with you, and so we moved forward on that.
Yeah, the precariousness of urban schools, where the shift in one person leaving the position for a variety of reasons why they may leave, and if that position is not filled properly, the direction that can cause the entire work that has been done prior to head, man.
Yeah, that's real, man. That is real. That's real.
Yeah, I think that's an issue we really have to dig down to, because it's a lot about systems, right? It's people, but then it's having systems and infrastructure in place so that when those people leave, those things can continue and are sustainable.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's the one thing I will say. I actually thought that it would be more sustained when I left, and what I found out is that it wasn't. Like I remember literally sitting in a meeting with this was a new superintendent that I didn't necessarily have the best rapport with, because I remember when she got there, she said, "Oh yeah, I know your name." And I was like, "Well, what? How do you know my name?" She's like, I've heard some things about you." And I was like, I mean, good or bad? And she was like, "Oh no, they were all good." And I was like, "Yeah, you took a little bit too long to say they were all wrong." So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. The need for sustainability and developing some type of sustainability plan, even while people are immersed in the work, so the work doesn't get lost.
Yeah. So I would imagine in the role that you're currently serving, that's part of what you're doing, right? So you're the founder and president of Comprehensive Discipline Solutions, right? So let's tell the audience about that. What is that?
We are an education/human services consulting company. But yeah, that we do trainings, we go deep dives in schools, we do assessments on programs, we do kind of program objectives. Like there's really not much that we don't do in relationship to schools and or programs, because the need is there. And yeah, I mean the need is there. So yeah, we do a lot of work. I mean, there's a website. I think you guys have the website. If not, I'll send it to you. But yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done specifically in our communities around schools, and schools in both the kids' way perspective, but also in the parents' way. So people kind of know what they should be looking for and what to expect. I think that's actually one of the biggest challenges, in my opinion, for African Americans in school. And I was on a panel this weekend discussing this. Public education in America is to give us basic skills. That's it. It's not to educate us. It's not to empower us in the militant Black power. It's not. That has to come from home, or that has to come from that school program.
Yeah, man.
In my opinion, too much is being thrust into public education as far as expectations. Like you're supposed to. I remember I said this weekend. Like the only thing we don't do is feed. We don't have children. But we do. We clothe them, we feed them, we educate them, we give them morals, we give them values, we everything. We give them aftercare, we give them before care. Like they're we have to understand public education for what it is, and provide the supplemental resources that we need to provide on our end.
Man, you are preaching to the choir, but I do know there's the audience out there that will say, if you're in communities, disadvantaged communities, lower income communities, they come with these problems. So how are you possibly educating them if you're not addressing those problems? How would you respond to that?
I would say we actually still are educating them, but I would suggest that, these aren't the only group of Black kids that have problems. I mean, you think about our grandparents, you think about even our parents, like they all
Mm-hmm.
had problems too, but the
Mm-hmm.
expectation was come to school, learn, get your education.
Yeah.
And that for me as a career educator for the last 28 years, that is a little bit different. It's a different vibe that I'm
Yeah.
having now with parents than I had when I first started my career. When I started my career, I'd call home, they'd be like, okay, what happened or what did he do?
Mm-hmm.
Now when
Mm-hmm.
I call, it's what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And literally, I have a story. When I was a director of student services, we one of my guys called a mother and let her know, like, yo, your son needs to come to school or we're going to go to truancy court. And the mother calls me and says he was rude and he was nasty. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't take that. My people are not nasty. I don't believe in that. So I called the mother in
Mm-hmm.
for a meeting, and she tells me she don't like nobody calling calling her to tell her about her son. Like, don't ever
Mm-hmm.
call me about my son. I don't care. Don't. I mean, it was this whole thing, and we just trying to let you know, like he gonna go to truancy court. We don't want to see you in court. And she just like, I said what I said, just stormed out. And I was like, wow, okay, so this is what we doing now. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but in my experience in 28 years, I've seen a different kind of parent kind of evolve or come to the table. Certainly not all. I'm not suggesting all, but
Yeah.
it's a different environment.
Oh yeah, and then of course we matriculated as a youth through those schools as well, and so it was a different day and age when we were in there,
Mm-hmm.
and even like you said, even in your experience as an educator, but as a student and being in that role as a student, and then having to answer to our parents, that was a
Yeah.
different day and age.
Oh yeah.
Just the fact, I don't even remember ever coming to my mother and complaining about a teacher. That was nothing you would do.
Mm-hmm.
Mother don't want to hear about your complaints and your ideas about teachers. Maybe I'll share that with my friends, but my mother could care less about how I feel about a teacher.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
never, and I don't know if that's bad or good, to be honest. As we evolve as a people and as we get more freedoms as a people, some of those are the consequences of freedom, right? Some
Yes.
of those are the consequences of more privilege, right? So I'm not saying it's a bad thing or good thing, but it is a thing though. Right.
It absolutely is. I mean, I had an experience when I was at Noble. My mom, one of my, I think my social studies teacher, Susan Clark, I'll never forget her name. Susan Clark called my house on a Saturday morning, and I didn't hear the conversation. I just heard my mother saying, oh, really? Oh, really? Oh, thank you, Miss Clark. And I just remember that door flying open and her, nah, 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 and you better get your damn grades up. I'm gonna light your ass up.
Mhm.
I went to school Monday afternoon. Was like, Miss Clark, can I have some extra work? She was
Yeah.
like, yeah. How was your weekend? How was your weekend?
Yeah, the
So
mom on
yeah.
the phone. Oh, really is never. Oh, really. Oh, okay, really, really. That's never a good thing.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
man. So I think we better move on. I feel like I could talk to you. Like I said, you're one of ours, and we could chit chat about education forever. I do want to see if we tapped into what you do in terms of consulting work. Did we get into that, or do you have a little more you want to share with regards to that?
I do. So probably one of my biggest things. Actually, I've been doing this. I just did something in Nashville Tuesday, and I'll be doing something in another state next week. And is the notion of trauma.
Mhm.
I have a belief. There's a conversation about Black people, and they may not say it's about Black people, but there's always this conversation about poverty, and poverty is the reason, and poverty this, and poverty that. And I'm
Mhm.
not dismissing that the lack of
Mhm.
resources, financial resources, impacts, the way you can kind of live your life. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm
Yeah.
saying though is that my personal belief, and I think it would be backed up by data, is we have a culture of trauma in America and
Mm.
specifically Black America that we
Mm.
all live under. And it creates these kind of unnatural norms and kind of irregular norms. Like I
Yeah.
remember talking to my cousin who's from Flint, and he was like, yeah, so and so just too nice. And I
Mhm.
remember hearing the same things when I was in Detroit. And
Mhm.
one of my best
Mhm.
friends in the world,
Yeah.
I met when I moved to Grand Rapids. He introduced himself, and I was like, who is this punk talking to me? Like, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to gain? Like, you know how we roll. You know how we roll. There's this whole guard thing that we have up that
No doubt about it, man.
impacts our ability not only to exceed as people, as individuals, but collectively as people. It impacts our ability to grow and to bond and to be unified and to be all of those things. And so it's just kind of this almost, I call it like an internal self-destruct mechanism. Like, as soon as it's not, I'm not suggesting that happens all the time, but I know for me growing up in Detroit, it was, you giving people the side eye. And I'll tell you a quick story. My wife and I were in Palm Springs, California. I was doing a thing out there, and we had lunch on the main strip. And so Detroit taught me I'm always peeping at threats. Where the threats at, where the exits at, where's the safety at. Literally, that's how my mind is. And we're having lunch, so we're going back.
You had to be around. You had to have been around some East Siders. I mean, that's that's East Side 101 right there.
That's West Side 101 too.
Okay.
So we're driving back to our room, and I say to her, I said, "Oh, honey, that's the guy that was downtown." She's like, "How do you know this?" And it hit me like this is the Detroit. Detroit is still embedded in my behavior, in that I'm always looking to see where the threats are, where the exits are, whether it's she and I are together, or I'm with my daughter, or the three of us are together. I'm always trying to make sure everybody is safe. And that, to me, is a reflection of that quote unquote culture of trauma that we've all experienced. Particularly those of us who've grown up in urban environments. I mean, when I went to Morgan, a lot of my friends talked about their experiences in LA and Philadelphia, New York. And it was we had very similar experiences as far as the violence and the guns and the drugs and all those other things. So yeah, that's probably one of our biggest things is this whole notion of not the culture of poverty, but the culture of trauma, and realizing that we are all impacted by it, specifically us as Black men, because we don't really have avenues that allow us to talk and to sort through it. We got our friends. I'm not suggesting we don't have friends who might help us through it, but there is no larger platform for us to discuss that.
Yeah, man. Again, dangerous hearing you talk, because I got so many places I can go with it. I'm really thinking about the Willie Lynch syndrome that our people face, and I know Willie Lynch is a myth, but the things associated with it are not mythological. We see those things, and the self-refueling of distrust in our community is definitely one of those things. But like I said, we will be here forever, and neither one of us have forever to be here talking on Zoom. So we want to give you an opportunity to drop any social media or anything that people can reach out to you for and support you in all the work that you're doing. So go ahead and drop that for us.
So I am absolutely horrific at social media. Like, I got a Facebook page that's literally my name. That's the only social media I got. I'm sorry, I'm on LinkedIn too. Those are the two places. Facebook and LinkedIn are the places I exist. I stay away by and large from social media. If I do post anything, typically it's to LinkedIn or it's to Facebook. I don't typically get involved with the gram and all those other things. They just don't work for me. I don't have those are the two places you catch me on LinkedIn.
I think the way you even calling it is probably not the way I think they call it IG or something, And I'm not on IG. We're one and the same. We're one and the same. My name is on my Facebook page, and I don't really get on there that much, and I'm not very good at it, and that and I'm on LinkedIn as well. But I think what I want to make sure is, if somebody wants you to come to their school and speak, if somebody wants your consulting service, where do they go for those things?
Okay, so there's two websites. There is the first, which deals with my book with Niggas Ain't Astronauts. It is Hartwell, HARTWELL, the letter X and the number 3.com. Hartwell X number 3.com. And then the other one, which is for Comprehensive Discipline Solutions, is Treycs.com. TREYCS.com. And both of those places, if you want to get in contact with me, you want me to come somewhere, you want me to speak, you can reach me on those things, as well as I think my you guys have my email as well. So yeah, those are probably the three best ways to kind of, if you want to get in contact, to contact me.
Okay, and it's okay if we share the email in our
absolutely
episode as well. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Excellent. All right, I've lofted enough softball questions at you. Now it's time for the most difficult question that we pose to each and every one of our guests. You ready?
Yes.
Have you ever been on the cover of a magazine?
Have I? I don't think I've ever been on a cover of a magazine. I've been on a cover of a newspaper, and obviously in my book, but not a magazine.
Okay, so you put yourself on the cover of your book, and that's great. And you've been in a newspaper before. Has it been the cover of the newspaper?
I don't even remember. It was so long ago. I honestly don't remember. I'll give you a quick thing of the book, a quick picture of the book, because people joke me about the picture. So if folks go to purchase the book, this is what the book looks like.
You got the full part working. I see you.
Full part, full perm, hot comb to my hair. My mom checked me up. But
yes, indeed.
It is what it is.
It's gonna come back at some point. They always do.
This ain't come back, doctor.
Not for us. Well, you never know. The stuff they're doing with science and everything, you never know. But if it has to come back naturally, it's not coming back for us. Yeah. All right. So one of the things that we like to do for all of our guests is place them on the magazine cover, the Dripping in Black magazine cover. And so we have one for you. My executive producer, S Squared, Sean Smith, is going to show you yours.
All right. I'll take it.
All right. And that is a thank you. And that is a parting gift that we will laminate, ship out to you at a later date as a big thanks for stopping by the Dripping in Black podcast.
Appreciate it, brother. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
This was fun.
We appreciate you. Yeah. We had my producer mentioned in the chat that you can come back. We're going to definitely have to get you back on because there's so much more. We just started peeling the orange and there's so much more there for us to get into. And so I'll be looking forward to that discussion. But any shout outs you want to give before we close this thing out?
Shout out to my lovely wife, Crystal Morris Murphy, and a shout out to my baby girl, Kaya Denise Murphy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my uncles and aunts and family, because I'm not here. I'm not talking to you without them.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. We want to thank Robert A. Murphy for stopping by the Dripping in Black podcast. We also want to remind you that the DIBK Drip Shop is open. Go to dibkdripshop.com to cop the latest Dripping in Black merch. As you can see, I'm representing with the red Dripping in Black original tee. So this and a lot of other merchandise is available for you at dibkdripshop.com. And as always, a huge thanks to all of our listeners, viewers, supporters, and subscribers. And until next time, be kind, be loving, and be excellent on purpose. It is a choice.
Amen.
Up next on the Dripping in Black podcast, we speak to 2023 Miss Rodeo, Michigan, Kalila Smith.
Why don't you guys step into fields that are not really populated with people of color, African Americans? Because we don't see ourselves there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's where I took my rodeo queen title, and I'm like, I got you.
Yeah.
That's when I was like, I'm gonna step on this podium and I'm gonna be the punching bag, whatever. If you don't want to be in the spotlight, I'll take that first thing, and so you can come along and be like, hey, I seen someone do it. I can do it as well.
You have just experienced a Dripping in Black production.